Imagine a place that is the very heart of a war machine. For Nazi Germany, that place was the Ruhr Valley. By early 1943, this 30-mile stretch of factories, steelworks, and coal pits was churning out nearly 70% of Germany's steel and over half of its entire industrial output. It was an engine of war, and British planners knew that if they could stop it, the Third Reich would begin to suffocate. The question wasn't whether to attack the Ruhr, but how. The valley's lifeblood was water. Tucked into the hills above the factories were massive reservoirs held back by three colossal dams: the Mtn, the Eder, and the Sorp. These dams supplied hydroelectric power and the millions of gallons of water needed for industrial cooling. The theory was beautifully simple. Destroy the dams, unleash catastrophic floods, and cut off the power and water. The factories would grind to a halt, and the Nazi war effort would suffer a blow from which it might never recover. But there was a problem, a very big, very solid problem. These dams were fortresses. Repeated bombing raids in 1940 and 1941 had dropped tons of high explosives, but the results were pitiful. The Mtn Dam's wall, 40 meters thick at its base and built of massive interlocking stone, shrugged off conventional bombs like raindrops. Even the Rave's largest 4,000-pound cookie bombs just scarred the hillsides. The dams themselves remained intact, mocking the bombers high above. To make matters worse, the Germans weren't taking any chances. Each reservoir was ringed with anti-aircraft batteries, ready to fill the sky with flak. And stretched across the water were heavy torpedo nets, preventing any underwater approach. With 3 years of failed British attacks as evidence, the Germans boasted that the dams were indestructible. By 1942, even analysts at the British Air Ministry were forced to agree. Their calculations were bleak. To breach a wall that thick, you couldn't just drop a bomb on top of it. You had to detonate a massive charge against the inner face of the dam, deep underwater. This would use the immense pressure of the water itself to multiply the force of the blast against the masonry. But how could you get a bomb there? A bomb dropped from high altitude would either bounce off the wall or shatter on impact. If you used a delay fuse to let it sink, the currents would drift it away from the target, torpedoes. They were useless against the nets and the shallow approaches. Physics, it seemed, was the dam's greatest defender. By February 1943, Bomber Command had all but given up. The dams were left on planning maps, more for propaganda than as a realistic objective. The planners turned their attention to softer targets, ball-bearing factories, railway yards, places where conventional bombing could actually make a difference. The heart of the German war machine would keep on beating, but unbeknownst to them, one man refused to accept the word impossible. His name was Barnes Wallace, an engineer with a stubborn streak and a mind that didn't follow conventional paths. For months, he had been filling notebooks not with designs for bigger bombs, but with a strange, almost childish idea inspired by a game he played as a boy, skipping stones across a lake. What if, he wondered, a bomb could be made to do the same. What if you could design a weapon that would bounce across the surface of the reservoir, leap clear over the torpedo nets, and hit the dam wall flush? Then it would sink to the perfect depth before exploding. It sounded utterly preposterous. When he first proposed the idea of a bouncing bomb, senior RAF officers thought Wallace had gone mad. But Wallace had two things on his side: mathematics and an engineer's relentless determination. He didn't see impossibility. He saw a set of variables that needed to be solved. He saw a physics problem. How fast should the bomb spin? At what speed and altitude should the aircraft fly? What was the perfect angle of approach? Translating that simple image of a skipping stone into a working weapon was a brutal challenge. A skipping stone is governed by surface tension and velocity. A 9,000-pound bomb behaves very, very differently. Wallace needed precision. The exact airspeed the plane had to maintain, the precise altitude of release, the rate of backspin required to keep the bomb stable as it skipped across the water. One tiny mistake wouldn't just mean a wasted bomb, it would mean the loss of an aircraft and its crew. He began his calculations in April 1942, working on his own time without official sanction or funding. Notebook after notebook was filled with complex models of approach angles, release heights, and spin rates. The numbers that emerged were terrifying. An aircraft would have to fly at a steady 240 miles per hour at just 60 feet above the water. At night, this combination of low altitude and high speed violated every safety doctrine in bomber command. The bomb itself would need to weigh around 9,000 pounds and be spun backwards at 500 revolutions per minute before it was released. When Wallace finally took his calculations to the Ministry of Aircraft Production in March 1942, he was met with polite disbelief. The officials listened, nodded, and then gently urged him to focus on more orthodox, more sensible projects. One internal memo summed up the skepticism perfectly, asking bomber crews to fly at treetop level over water at night, while holding an exact speed and releasing a spinning bomb at a precise moment was, the official wrote, simply asking for the impossible. Barnes-Wallace left that meeting with no authorization and no funding. His radical idea was rejected. But Wallace was not a man who gave up easily. For him, impossible was just the beginning of the problem, and the fate of the war might just depend on whether he could convince the world he was right. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more incredible tales from history. We'll see you in the next one.